Welcome to another edition of Working with Gen Z. Friends, we've often heard for years experts and leaders have said that AI and technology should ease the workplace, right, with automation and make us more efficient. And perhaps there's lots of evidence of that how mundane work or repetitive work can be automated so that it frees up more time for bigger, better things. But in the quest of doing that, there comes another question that says that when we're automating, are we depriving the one generation that we're going to talk about today, which is Gen Z, who has grown up with technology at their fingertips? And are we judging too quickly to say that if we're removing something which may be repetitive, it's perhaps the very same thing could give them the experience of building and becoming a leader? And also the fact that perhaps are we making assumptions of who embraces technology? Is it just the Gen Z or is it a generation which is much more experienced? And that's the dilemma that we're going to explore today with our expert and our guest. I'm very happy that this is finally happening. I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Jeff Arnold. Jeff, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Jeff, so let's begin. I have questions on a topic which is so very contemporary, so much debate, so much of this is out there in the news, and we hear it every day. So and such and such companies automating this, and we're gonna lose X number of jobs and all of that. But we'll park that for a moment. I'd love to for you to take a couple of minutes and tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about your background and the incredible work that you've done.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Um, Way back in the day, I was in the mortgage industry. And back then, it was before the cloud was around. And even back then, I was working on connecting the different systems that we have so people weren't, inputting the same information over and over because obviously that's fraught for errors. So I had people using thumb drives going from one computer to the other to move data. So once the cloud arrived, I was thrilled because now we were working on connecting systems that were in the cloud and working on eliminating all of that mundane work that people really just hate to do. So that is what I do with my company. 13 years ago, I started Four Spot Consulting, and we work with companies to build automation. Obviously, now that includes AI. And the goal is that we are going to save the people we work with at least 25% of their week by eliminating all of that mundane work that they do repetitively over and over every day.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think this is very apt, Jeff, or the topic that we're gonna dive in. I will go right into it. Let me just start by asking the burning question. That's the Jeff. Where do you draw the line? I think this whole debate and the topic that we want to talk today. Where do you draw the line on how much automation benefits versus something that is actually taking away expertise, and expertise in this case for Generation Z, who was perhaps a debate could be is getting deprived of learning something, the building blocks, which helps them to kind of learn and go to that grind. So where do you draw the line? And just I love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So typically, when you're working on automated processes, you're working on implementing AI, you're drawing the line at the point of an important decision. So when we talk about eliminating the mundane, we're not necessarily talking about eliminating the decision points inside of an operation. We're talking about eliminating the copy and paste, eliminating go to this piece of software, copy data, and paste it into another software. People aren't learning things from copy and paste, right? Where they're learning is they have to know when to make the right decision, and that's the change that's happening now. So when we talk about, and I don't know, I know that we had previously talked about some things we would cover, but in the process, right, we talk about apprenticeships, right? We talk about what happens. This kind of leads into that apprenticeship idea is in apprenticeships, you would have somebody who is a senior knowledge person, right? Whatever that is, they have the experience and they would be working with somebody and they would be training them on the physical job. Well, training them on copy paste doesn't help anything. And so what's happening now, as it's happened for hundreds of years, right? So think about, well, I'll say what's changing is the job and the way that you manage the apprenticeship is now changing, it's shifting. So think about 100 years ago when machines came out on the factory floor. right? You had people that were physically sitting there hammering and, doing whatever they were going to do. They were physically doing the work. And the apprenticeship was to teach that person the physical job of how to do that work. And then machines came on the scene. And so now what happened was people had the same idea. This technology is going to take my job. But what happened is it shifted. Now, the person that used to be, hammer in hand doing the work now has shifted to now they learned how to run the machine. And so now the apprenticeship turned into not how to hammer something to make it work. It was how do I run the machine to make it work? And it's no different today with automation and AI. You're changing the way that you work the apprenticeship. It's not teaching somebody how to type faster, copy and paste, import export faster. It's teaching them the decisions that need to be made in that position so that the technology, the automation can take care of all the mundane, but now they're being trained on how to actually make the right decisions inside of that particular position.
Jeff, let's just kind of build on that. Yeah, okay, so we now have, AI is entering in such a rapid way, and even if we don't think about more advanced ways of leveraging AI, simple generative tools that everybody's using today in their day-to-day lives, right? From your perspective, where do you sense then, again, keeping the Gen Z lens, that what might they gain and what might they lose, right? So you made the case of, I want to eliminate the mundane, but now I've got AI. And I guess just to maybe add another layer as we're talking in the first question is that, is it killing some of my critical thinking ability? Or is it feeding me something that perhaps I should have thought before I just get a ready answer from a machine? And just on the point that we're talking, right? That the automation makes sense, but now we take that from automation to AI, and just wondering that what does Gen Z gain versus what does Gen Z lose? More curious to know what did they lose?
Well, in the process, I mean, obviously, Gen Z, one of the key elements of them in the workplace is they want their work to be valuable. Right? So being in a position where you're copying and pasting, that doesn't add value in their minds. When I think in a previous episode, somebody had made the comment about they meet the algorithm before they meet the people, I think was the statement. And so that's what's happening is if your systems are automated and they're seeing that and they then come into the job and they end up in a job that's not automated or doesn't have automation inside of it or doesn't have AI deployed in some way, now they almost feel duped that they had this great experience. They felt they were gonna have this great, job experience, and when they get in, they get caught up in that sludge of, like, trying to do all the mundane stuff. So, what's happening now is kinda going into that critical thinking. So, instead of being able to look at something physically and say, like, "Yes, this is correct because I've physically done it," now when there's something where AI is being deployed, it's a recrafting of the training that they're getting. Instead of being trained again on how to physically do something, they're being trained on how to make that deterministic evaluation. Did the AI give me the output that is correct? So it's kind of moving them up to the next level. Instead of, if you know that you're copying and pasting and it's supposed to say, yes, the data matches, that's great. But now, instead of you doing the physical copy paste, now the AI just comes back and says, here's the result. And now you skip that first step, but now you're making the decision, yes, the data matches. Okay, we're good. That's a very simplistic idea. But the idea is that the training that you get changes, right? With the job, the training changes. You're now learning, and the Gen Z folks are now learning how to make those decisions and as opposed to how to physically do the work.
So, Jeff, if we're just if you're a manager, right? How do you draw the distinction of saying that, okay, I think this adds value and this is more actually developmental? And I think just to add to the point that you made about the ability to make better decisions, right? I mean, if we just play the devil's advocate to say that, okay, one fine day, some of that is not available. Are we? Have we created, a generation which becomes over dependent? Is sort of my the extension of that.
I think if you are working on deploying an automation or AI process into your organization, you have to have documented the original process, right? Like so many organizations have some sort of documented process that, if the power goes out, what do we do? If this software crashes, what do we do? Like there's always some sort of a manual backup plan to what things are. And I think that you do need to have that documented. Like a proper automation deployment is not just running in and throwing automation or AI at the process that we already have today. Because most of the time, your processes aren't that well defined. And for automation, they need to be very well defined. So that's the first step of what we do is we go in and we work on helping them define those steps. But that process of defining the steps is what serves as the backup in case something happens that AI stops working or the software goes down or whatever it may be. There's that backup step. And that backup step is going to be when you're talking about AI, there's a prompt involved, right? You're not just throwing things into AI and saying, here's data, give me a result. Like you have a prompt, and that prompt is really walking through the logic of what needs to be evaluated there. So that's really kind of the framework and the backup process for that. And that's the way that we typically are working on deploying, and then that's your backup system so that people understand what the logic is that's going into that decision so that when the data comes back out, they can make sure that it's applying the right logic and it's giving the right results.
So, Jeb, what have you found in your experience or working with clients and where you help them with, automating some of this perhaps repetitive stuff when it comes to embracing technology, right? And have you do we sense? I'm just gonna try to compare one generation to another year, just to say that okay, fine. We all know that the Gen Z is a digital native, and they like tools and they like you know um, new devices, and they're very comfortable with everything. Do you sense that 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 maybe there's a undue assumption made about other generations? And what have you seen? In other words, when you do and bring in technology into the workplace, or you simplify a process, do you sense that perhaps some of that assumption of an elder or older generation is incorrect, or do you find that they adapt to that technology now as the next layer just as easily as Gen Z?
I think that if somebody has the mindset that they want to adapt, they can adapt without a problem. It's going to be, I think it's individual mindset. Gen Z has grown up, obviously, as you mentioned, they've grown up with technology in their hands their entire lives. All my kids are Gen Z, right? So, like, I know, I know where they are and what they do, right? They live on their phones,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean they're tech savvy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they're tech savvy with the tools that they need in order to deploy inside of their business. And I'm surprised with my kids, even though they're obviously I'm very tech savvy and I've kind of imparted that upon them. But even in some things they do, I'm surprised when they don't know something related to technology because you assume because they live with technology in their hands, you assume they know how to use technology on a desktop as they're working inside of their jobs. And the reality is that's not a direct correlation to what's happening. And a lot of times people assume that people that are older can't adopt technology. And that is not true either. I'm 56. I live in technology all day long. There are other people I know who are 56 who don't touch technology at all. So it all comes into mindset. And another great example, I think, is my dad, right? My dad is now 87 years old, and he ran the computer club in his community from the age of 74 to 86. For
Wow.
12 years, from 74 to 86, he was the president of the computer club. And he's the guy everybody came to when there was the tech issue with their iPad or whatever it was. So it's all mindset as to whether or not you want to adopt the technology or not. And if the technology is deployed properly, in my mind, properly, you're not just deploying it and making them go through the same convoluted processes to do something. You're simplifying the process. So a lot of times when we work with clients, We like to make sure that all the heavy lifting is on the back end, that we work on the technical stuff, but we try to make it point and click simple for them upfront. So instead of them having to think about is like sales teams, for example, instead of them having to think about, is this the fifth time I called this guy or the sixth time or the seventh and having to drop down which phone call number it is and all that kind of stuff. All we do is they mark down left voicemail and that's it. The back end has all the data to say, oh, this is call number six. Therefore, we're going to do this afterwards and generate this and do this and all this kind of stuff. All they need to do, keep it simple, right? All they need to do is check a box that says left voicemail or made contact or whatever. So you try to make it as easy as possible on the front end as you deploy and implement the processes.
So, Jeff, I I guess when you're in plan implementations or in cycles, what's been your experience having done different industries at different levels and different parts of the organization? Like, what would you say are, I mean, it's the big debate that's going on, right, with the AI and versus human skills. So, what would you say um, should not be automated? I mean, these are the skills that one must live through and experience it firsthand. And I'm just not going to even limit this to Gen Z. I would say that even for experienced leaders.
Yeah, I think the thing that you really have to make sure that you're not automating are the critical decisions that are driving the company, right? That and in those positions, and go back, let's talk about like what that means, right? So inside of AI, you could have people are automating customer service where somebody sends in a ticket request because they forgot their password. AI takes care of all that. That doesn't involve decision. Um, but where you need to be able to make the decisions are at the critical junctures inside of either the operational flow. So if you have a decision that needs to be made for this client for something you need to do for them, that's where you need to have human in the loop. They have to be there to be able to take some sort of action based on experience. Now, AI can really help with that. So, in that process, AI is not making the decision, but you can have AI do tons of good quality analysis so that now that supervisor, that decision maker, that manager isn't having to go back and search data through, I need to go search for the client information, or I need to go look for this report, or I need to go do this. AI will give them all that information so that now their decision-making process is far more well-informed. And so now they have all of the information they need because they know, having the experience, they know that they need to have this data point, this information, this background, whatever that is, they know they need that information in order to make a well-informed decision. So now AI can work on doing all of that. Again, that's the mundane work, right? Gather all that data, put it together, and even do a lot of the analysis for the decision maker so that they can look and say, oh, I need to have a metric that's at least 94% and the metric is 98. Okay, great. Like that's good. They can read that. It makes their process faster, more efficient. And a lot of times AI is going to pull out stuff that they may have forgotten to get,
Mm.
or it can actually do sentiment analysis on things to be able to say, you know what? We've had 5 phone calls with this person, and it seems like each time they're getting a little, less engaged with us, or they're getting more engaged, or whatever that is. Like it
Mm.
can read some of the sentiment out of those things so that now when they have a decision to make, they come into that decision far more well informed.
So, can you, Jeff, just curious, I mean, again, without whatever you can share, I mean, from your client portfolio, can you think of a story or an example where perhaps some of this is strengthened and just go back to think about that, okay, a fresh pool of talent is coming in the system and doing whatever the X amount of automation that we have undertaken, it's strengthened the way in which they're now sitting and kind of be able to contribute more. That could be one example. And conversely, and I don't know if you may have one or you may not have one, is that perhaps goes back to our initial discussion that perhaps automating may have deprived or weakened some of that. And I think we just very openly to say that, okay, um, you know, is there a positive story and could there be a story where maybe I think they were just sort of they lost out an opportunity of learning. Just curious.
Right. Well, I'll start with the second one, the place where things could break down. And usually, where we see a breakdown, going back to almost the first question we had in this podcast, is structure. A lot of times, what happens is leaders are being told by their superiors, "We need to deploy AI." What's that mean? Right? They have no idea of what that means. So they go out and they might create a prompt or something that they think is going to benefit what's going on, but they don't test it well enough. Um, they just kind of throw it at a broken process, right? And so what happens is if you throw AI and automation at a broken process, all you do is make errors a lot faster.
Yeah.
And so that's where I see the issues coming in is not where somebody or like go into the next step is and or they don't adjust their training processes. So you need to think about AI and automation as like a new assistant, right? Would you hire a personal assistant today and say, "Here, start, good luck." Right? You wouldn't do that. You would train that person. You would sit with them. You would explain to them if they're using personal assistant as an example, you'd explain to them what airlines you like, where you like to sit, how you like to fly, what your turn, you explain to them all that information. But people think that AI is just going to automatically know all of that. And that's not the case. So you need to make sure that you train AI just as you would train a brand new employee. It's not going to take as long because AI obviously is far more has far more data points than we can even have inside of our brain. So I use it as a thought partner all the time. But in that process, if you don't plan properly, if you don't adjust your processes that you have in place today to adapt for that new reality, then you're going to see failure and you're going to see the frontline employees struggle because they don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know what good output is from AI. So you say, hey, AI is doing all this, just go ahead and take care of whatever. Well, if AI is giving them bad output because the input information or the prompt was wrong, now they're going to continue down a path to make more errors, and then they're going to get frustrated because they're being, scolded or yelled at or reprimanded for doing bad work when in fact AI is the issue, but the issue really is the person that deployed it. So that's where I see failures. I think that if you deploy, I guess I should say, I haven't seen a situation where properly deployed automation and or AI has been detrimental to an organization. So on the positive side, I have companies that we've done amazing things with, and they've seen phenomenal growth and been able to really streamline operations. So my best client that I work with right now is in a very paper heavy industry. They're in mortgage servicing. So lots of paperwork, lots of data. They used to have a process where it took them 45 minutes just to get a deal in the door and work on the initial processing. They would get emails from all over the place. They would print it all out. They would put it in a binder, put it on their desk, right? Old school mortgage style stuff. That was when we first started working with them. Now they went from a 45-minute paper intensive process down to a 1 minute paperless process because we've been able to use the technology to parse all the content, have people upload their documents direct, parse it all with AI, extract all that data, put it into the forms that need to be completed, feed it into their CRM, feed everything, rename everything, put it all into their Dropbox, like all the things they physically did. And the customer experience has gotten dramatically better because now, instead of the customer having to input all that data, now they only fill in the blanks on a couple pieces of data. Internally, their team can go through a file in literally a minute, just checking off one or two things. Their throughput has been phenomenal. Their customer experience has been phenomenal, and their growth has been transformative.
Yeah. So fabulous. I think you make a very good point. I think how do we train AI? And I think that whole setting up the structure is so very essential. It's- Jeff, just, I mean, as a way to yeah, what message would you want to give to the manager today, right? Well, I think we all have to accept the fact that um yeah, it's here to stay. It will only accelerate. So I guess maybe two parts to the kind of the final question, which is that what would you advise to the manager who's trying to gain efficiency, perhaps save cost and get more insights from data and be more close to the customer. Or what not to do when it comes to keeping the experiences of the human experiences that are essential. And then from a Gen Z's perspective, right? I think the fact that even a lot of the AI gets thrown at them, right? What can they do to become better with technology? I think that's a reality, but what can they do beyond that, right? In other words, I know that AI is much sharper and faster and gives me 10 times more data points and all of that, right? But beyond that, so in other words, let's two sides. What can the manager do to keep the human skills inventory sort of intact, and just so that the Gen Zs were listening, and when you're a Gen Z coming in, uh, could there be something where you're not heavily overly dependent, and just some homework that they should always also kind of keep in mind?
Yeah. So one of the key things I say in my keynotes is that technology doesn't replace you, it elevates you. And I truly believe that. I believe that technology is not here to replace the people that are in the various positions. And a lot of times supervisors are afraid of that. Even entry level workers are afraid. They're afraid they're going to get replaced by the technology. But if it's deployed correctly, what happens is this: supervisors now get rid of the mundane work, right? If they can eliminate, and many times we're eliminating, 10 hours a week of that mundane stuff. That's 10 more hours a week that they get to spend on exactly what you're talking about, the human side of work, right? They get to work on developing their people. They get to work on planning the structure for how they're going to be able to grow their department. And they get to spend that time actually interacting on a human level with the people in their department. So, from our perspective, I mean, everybody's already overworked. And so, if you can eliminate a lot of that mundane so they can focus on the human side of work, I always say, don't do the paperwork, do the people work, right?
Mhm.
And so, focus on working with your people. That's something that automation and AI allows you to do if you deploy it right. And then on the Gen Z side, obviously, they want their work to matter, they want to be engaged. And I think the one thing that they're in a tough spot right now, I believe, because AI's a lot of people are throwing AI at things without that structure, right? So they're kind of throwing things out, and they're frontline, like you said, they're entry level workers, they're frontline workers with a little bit of experience. They don't have all that knowledge of their predecessors that are there, and so they don't know if AI is giving them the right answer. So I think one of the things that Gen Z really can do is ask why. Right? Ask why. Like, "Oh, we're doing this process. Okay, can you explain it to me?" Not why, like, why, like, not why are we doing this, right? It's explain to me. Please explain to me why we're doing this. What's the structure, the framework, the purpose, the reason we're doing this? Because that will then give them the background, the structure, and the knowledge to be able to understand, okay, well, if our end goal with what we're doing with this particular task is A, and I get feedback from AI that doesn't look like it's going down the path toward A, then now I have the ability to make that cognitive decision that, hey, maybe that's not right. So maybe I need to go and review something or ask my supervisor, whatever that process is. If they, instead of just blindly doing what is happening, ask why from an inquisitive standpoint, not a controversial standpoint. Like, please explain to me. I want to understand. Let me understand what's happening with this so that I can become a better person in this whole cog of what we have going on inside the company. And one of the things, of just quick aside, if you don't mind, is one of the things I found very, very helpful for our clients is we have worked with them to build what we call our corporate brain, where if you think about inside of an organization, you have a lot of data that is in like mental silos, right? Each individual person, I've been here 20 years. I know all the things about this company. Great. It's great that you know that, right? But you need to get that knowledge into the hands of your people, right? Like that this particular customer, you need to talk to Joe, not Mary, because Joe's whatever it is, all that stuff that you need to get into the hands of your team, because if that person leaves, that knowledge goes with them. So one of the things I've really worked with my clients on building is this corporate brain concept where the beauty of AI is you can just word vomit into it and give it as much information as you can, and it will retain that information. So what I did for myself in order to train my AI with as much information as I could, and what I built for my company so that my entire team has knowledge of this stuff, I've gathered all the data from our Slack conversations, our email conversations, our project management system, all of our recorded Zoom phone calls that we've had with all of our clients about all their services. I've used AI to grab all that data and put it into one giant database. And then what I did was I just sat down and I love transcription. I use Whisper Flow, but I love it because I can talk into my computer much faster than I can type, and I'm a very fast typer. Um, I just sit there and turn it on and I just talk. Like for my client that I mentioned in the mortgage industry, I just talk. Hey, we have a process that does this and this and this, and the client likes this, and I just dump as much information as I can about that I can think about in my brain, dump it into this transcription, and then feed that into the brain. And now I have shared my tribal knowledge, right? The stuff that I know, and especially as a smaller business owner, I become the bottleneck to a lot of things. By doing that, I am able to free up and make all of the knowledge I have available to my whole team, and my team has done the same. So now instead of if we're working on a very specific type of automation or piece of software that I know we've touched before, but I'm not sure, I can now ask our corporate brain to give me all the information about that instead of having to track down and hope that the person that worked on it is still working with us. Right, so now I have all that knowledge. The AI spits up like I talked about the decision making, AI now gives me that full analysis of the software, what happened, what were the nuances to it, etcetera. So building that corporate brain to me is something that is gonna help everybody because now, especially you're working with the Gen Z people that are on the front lines, now, instead of having to figure out that, well, Joe knows this stuff and Mary knows this stuff, you can just go to the brain and say, "Hey, I'm working with this client. What do I need to know about them?" It's like, "Oh, boom, here's the information." So that is something I think is really critical that a lot of people miss in the process, and it's something I found has been very successful working with our clients.
Fabulous. And I assume that gets updated fairly frequently or every so often so that it's refreshed and you're continuously sort of adding the more tacit knowledge in the system that goes into this or dump that or
Exactly. Yep, we have it set up. We have it set up so that every week it gathers every new piece of data that's been put out that week and puts it back into the brain so that we have all that information. So, um, as well as having all of our systems connected with MCP servers and things like that. Um, but yeah, it has really been a dramatic change for some of our clients to be able to have that information because it frees up. I love to travel, so it frees me up to be able to maybe be out and about while my team still has a bunch of my brain dumped knowledge in there that they can pull upon whenever they're working with their clients. And it helps your training, right? So if you can get all your managers and all your supervisors to do that, now the training for the entry level people, now the training for the AI, all of that can be put into that system so that now you're crafting, custom messaging for sales, you're crafting custom experiences for your clients. Your systems understand your clients extremely well. So if you're using AI and helping to create and craft information or get information, now it can give you very specific client specific information to help you with their businesses if you're however you're deploying that or internally your department, whatever it is. So everything that you can feed into it is beneficial to help craft and make sure that it's going down the right path, as opposed to having some piece of knowledge that sits with one person that, it's that old, in case somebody gets hit by a bus analogy, right? Is you want to make sure that you get as much information out so that if that person is no longer there, all of that knowledge doesn't go with them.
absolutely no. I think we heard the old saying, the knowledge is in the network. So I think we do need to capture that. One last question, Jeff, just as a way to close out. I think just on the debate, I think you make a very, very strong, compelling story about the how we think about, and I really like the line that technology is not there to replace, but to elevate you. But just to can't you can't ignore the fact that what you read every day with so much right sizing and restructuring happening. I guess just someone who works so very closely to bring the positive side of technology, right? What is one message? Perhaps it could be a slight repeat just to alleviate the anxiety that the Gen Z generation may have on what could they do to continuously upskill as you think about. I like the point about asking the why, but
Mhm.
you know, what else can they do? Is it more upskilling this sheer tools versus the skills versus talking to peers? Just sort of as a more general question.
I think getting a general knowledge of the proper way to work with AI is gonna be beneficial. I think a lot of people use AI as a search agent, right? They just plug in like, "How do I X?" Right? It's something that it's more of a search agent. I think that what they need to really start to understand to be able to progress in the future world of where we're gonna be is start to understand more of how AI can be used as a business partner inside of your organization, not just something you ask a question to and it spits out an answer. How can you build it to do agentic work? Um, how can you work with it? How can you prompt it properly? Even if you're just working on the prompt side, how can you prompt it properly to get the outcomes that you want? Most people don't even know how to do a proper prompt to be able to get the data that they're looking for. They ask a simple question without giving it the framework of like, this is the information, this is the output I'm looking for. Here's a sample of what I would like to have the output
Yeah.
look like. Like, instead of giving it all the framework, and it kind of jumps back to that training a new assistant, right? If you go to AI and go, "Hey, I need a report." Well, okay, well, what kind of report? Like, what kind of report? What kind of output do you want? How many data points do you want? How far back do you want it? Like, all that stuff that you would typically have to tell a person that's gonna go physically do that thing, you need to put that in the prompt. Tell it where you're coming from. What's the background to it? What are you trying to accomplish? All that kind of stuff. So I think to answer the question of what can they do is educate yourself more on how to properly use AI. Proper prompting is the first thing. Then getting into how can I build maybe not full on agents. I mean, agents are something that are going to be coming up and they're I have I've found very few instances from my clients where they truly need an agent at this point yet. It's great to talk about. The concepts are fantastic. Mini-ish agents I have in place for a lot of clients, but not fully functioning, run the whole world of their company agent type scenario. Because again, there's so much that goes into the prompting to make sure that it's doing what it needs to do. Little mini agents that do specific tasks, fantastic. Um, but learn about them, learn about agents, learn about how they work, learn about how to structure them, when and where to deploy them, when and where not to. Kind of going back to the whole conversation we had earlier today, is understand where AI can be highly beneficial and understand where you need to have the human in the process. And I think that if they can get that really solid framework, then they're going to be able to be the thought leaders moving forward to be able to be the ones that are now instructing their junior teams of how to work on deploying things.
Fabulous. Jeff, this has been one fantastic conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. I think you make a very sort of compelling story about technology is here to stay. Let's leverage for the good, but not forgetting the fact that there is a young generation which is so critical to the leadership of the society, of companies, of communities, and therefore, how do we help them to think and leverage technology? At the same token, make sure that they do have to learn, as you say, yeah, become good with technology, good with people skills, and the same messaging for the managers. Jeff, you do fantastic. Well, where can people reach you? What are some of the places where people can find you?
Okay, well, first, I think I shared with you a link for we call Ops Map as our first step of what we do for our clients. That is our initial audit that we do. So we have a quick one-page Ops Map quick audit that I shared with you. If you can share that with folks, that's a great way for them. The big thing about technology and AI is like you're not going to eat the whole elephant in one bite, right? You're going to go and you're going to start small, and I highly recommend people do that. A lot of people like to jump in and attack the whole world. Just do one thing at a time. Prove that it works. I guarantee if you're a supervisor and you do that and your team sees that it works, they're going to want to do more. So that ops map ought to give them a quick way to identify what they could do. And then to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can share my LinkedIn. Also, you can contact me. My company is 4 Spot Consulting. It's the number 4 and then Spot Consulting. And if they want to email, Jeff at 4spotconsulting.com. Yeah. And I'm more than happy to have any conversation with anybody about automation AI and how it can help. It's my passion and I love helping people with it.
Fabulous, Jeff. Thank you very much. We'll share some of that in the show notes, and just for everybody to reach out if they need some quick sort of a sounding board on how do we use technology for the better, but at the same time, look, it's something that doesn't ignore the people skills. So thank you once again, Jeff. It's been one fantastic
Absolutely.
conversation, and I hope that our travels take us where we can meet up in person at some point. And
Absolutely.
yeah, all the very best. Have a great weekend, and
That's great.
we'll talk soon. Take care.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.